Vince flies to North Carolina, attends the ceremony, flies back. The game's about to start. He's putting on his jersey as he's walking onto the floor. The game's about to start, and Vince is blowing in the back door. Oh my!
Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by DKI Canada. Across the street, across the country. They have teamed up to create an outstanding book on the history of the Raptors. Eric Smith and Andrew Bricker. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Our guest today, he hails from Burlington, a graduate of Humber Journalism, host of Headline Sports, Raptors reporter, host for 30 years at Global TV, Sportsnet, Sportsnet 590, NBA TV Canada. He's done Olympics play-by-play, co-host of Hoops with Ann Smith and Jones, the radio voice of the Raptors, now co-author of We the Raptors, Eric Smith. And joining him, Andrew Bricker from Toronto via Mississauga, a BA and MA in Literary Studies from the University of Toronto, PhD at Stanford University, a fellow at numerous institutions, associate professor of English literature at Ghent University, author of Libel and Lampoon, and now co-author of We the Raptors. Andrew Bricker, Eric Smith, welcome to the program, gentlemen. Good to have you here.
Thanks very much, Joe.
And of course, I
gotta say, Andrew's resume sounds way more impressive than mine, Joe. You know, like you. At a lot of these events, Andrew's been worried that he doesn't have enough sports stuff on there. But that intro you just gave, like, radio and okay, but then this book and this author and this professor. I mean, my goodness, I'm out of my league. I don't know about you, Joe.
Well, when I did a little bit of research here, I found he was a fellow at like major universities all over the world, and quite a resume. It's really impressive. For sure.
Well, it's nice to receive this recognition. It's it's always around these sports guys. You know, Eric always dismissing me for my boring books and boring lectures and boring topics, right? But yeah, it's nice to get a little recognition finally.
Right. Well, I have to ask you right at the hop, how does an English professor who's previously written about totally non-sports related material get involved in a book about the Raptors?
The answer is desperation. So I live in Belgium now. Grew up in Mississauga, went to U of T, and eventually found myself in Belgium about 8 years ago. Huge basketball fan, huge Raptors fan. But unfortunately, basketball games happen in the middle of the night in Europe. So if I'm lucky, maybe I get to see 1-2 games a week, typically that noontime tip-off on Sundays, which is almost uniformly the worst game of basketball the NBA plays throughout the season. So during COVID, I was, really hunting for a new project. I think like a lot of us sitting at home, kind of starting to go crazy. And Eric, who happens to be my brother-in-law, he's married to my older sister, Shannon. We were on a Zoom call and I just pitched out to Eric, hey, did you ever think about maybe writing a book about basketball? And maybe I should defer to Eric at this point because the story kind of follows him.
Well, so Joe, us guys in sports often, we don't really, we don't tend to shy away from having a little bit of an ego at times. So I kind of thought that Andrew meant that he wanted to write a book about me. And my initial reaction was, who the hell would want to read that book? And why would you want to write a book about me? So initially my reaction and my response was, no, I've never thought about writing a book and I have no interest in doing so. That's something you do when you're old and you're retired, if you even do it at all. Plus, again, who the hell would want to read that? But then as I quickly found out, as we chatted a little bit more over these Zoom calls and over the course of, the COVID dragging on and whatnot, no, what he meant was an NBA book, a basketball book, a Raptors book. And I started to warm to the idea again, the longer we dragged into the pandemic. Like, I think we were all searching for something to do or some kind of passion project. And I'm certainly not good with my hands, so I wasn't going to be doing any home renovations or anything like that. And we started to chat a little bit more about, well, if we did do a book, what could that book be? What might the topic be? What's out there that we could write about? And we both recognized that there was this 30th anniversary season coming up. But at the same time, Joe, we didn't want to write, with due respect to coffee table books, we didn't want to write a coffee table book that was, like picture, paragraph, and just something that is, relatively easy and fun. Is there something else we could do? And what we landed on was, I'm sure, a conversation that you and all your friends and all your viewers and listeners have had 10 times over, especially if they're sports fans. And that is, whether it's the Raptors or the Leafs or the Jays or the Boston Bruins or the Miami Heat, or you're talking about Real Madrid or wherever, in any corner of the globe, we talk about the top 3 in franchise history, the top 5 in franchise history, the top 10 in franchise history, or the Mount Rushmore. But what about everybody else? What about all the other guys for franchises, again, around the world, whether it be fellow starters, whether it be sixth men, whether it be second unit guys, role players, deep dudes down on the bench, that somehow, some way became fan favorites, that became institutions within the fan base, within the city, the province, the country, or wherever they are, the state, whatever it might be. What if we told their stories, because we don't hear from them as much? And then the loose little tie-in for the Raptors was, if we got 30 guys, maybe we could just kind of say there's a tie-in to the 30 years. This isn't really an anniversary book per se. It's more a collection of stories of 30 different Raptors over the course of time, but guys that maybe you don't hear as much from. Because, Joe, again, I know you were around the Raptors a lot as well, down at Air Canada Centre, now Scotiabank Arena, and you look up into the stands back in the day, and it might have been Damon Stoudemire, but there was also Doug Christie and number 13 jerseys in the stands. And it might have been Vince Carter in 15, but there was a lot of 33 Antonio Davis and 13 Jerome Williams, and the list goes on. There might have been a lot of number 4 Chris Bosh, but there was 11 TJ Ford and number 8 Jose Calderon. And again, the list goes on into the next era. Kyle Lowry, number 7, DeMar DeRozan, number 10, Kawhi Leonard, number 2. But I saw a lot of number 24 Norm Powell. I saw a lot of number 17 Jonas Valanciunas, and 54 Patrick Patterson, and number 6 Corey Joseph, the local kid from Toronto. So we started to think of, let's tell those stories from those players and then get their view and their lens on some of the greater moments in the franchise and tie that with a nice little bow in terms of the historical component of the 30-year anniversary. And that's kind of how it all came together. And We the Raptors came to be.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. Here it is. Here's the book. Okay, so We the Raptors, 30 players, 30 stories, 30 years. Excellent book. Loved the stories. Brought back some incredible memories. And, it was brilliant. It really was. How you basically told us how it all came together and the reasoning behind it. And yeah, I was surprised. At first I felt myself thinking, it's good to have the talk about the Vince Carters and Kawhi Leonards and all the other stuff, and Kyle Lowry's. But what about these other guys that I completely forgotten about? But when I started remembering them through the book, it was like, oh God, yeah. And it was actually got emotional many times. It was a lot of fun. It was. Who did the heavy lifting?
Eric, we both. I think we listen. We were both lifting heavy things, but they were different things. I would say, right? So
yes,
I think
that is the best answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
good.
I think I was coming to the project not as somebody who had connections to the players. I'm not a sports historian. I'm not a sports journalist. So I knew that Eric was going to have to do the heavy lifting when it came to getting in contact with the players, setting up interviews, conducting those interviews. And so that was very much his job. And in terms of what I was doing, once Eric conducted the interview, he'd send it to me. I'd auto-transcribe it. I'd then listen to the interview and verify the transcript, make sure it was accurate. And then typically Eric and I would talk about the interview, what came out of it? What's interesting from the perspective of the team? What's interesting from the perspective of the team's history, of the place the team was at that particular moment or during that particular season? Or what was interesting about the stories the players told about their professional development or their lives more generally. And I would then kind of drum up a quick draft of the chapter. And then Eric and I went back and forth, I don't know, at least a dozen times on every one of the chapters, between the two of us and our editor, Jim Gifford, over at Simon & Schuster. So I think, we were lifting different things. And in some ways, I was happy to do the lift of a lot of writing and research because I really could not have even started to do the work of figuring out how to get in contact with players and how to set up interviews with them.
Yeah, and Joe,
Right.
I'll jump in there. It was one of your questions might be, I'm going to jump ahead in your brain here a little bit and assume you might ask in terms of like, how did we select certain guys? And that was perhaps the hardest lifting of all, was trying to not only figure out who we wanted, but then lock in those guys and get those guys. And being completely frank and honest with you, there were a couple of guys that we wanted to get that we ultimately didn't, but I'm gonna steal Andrew's line that he was probably getting all prepared to use because he said it in another interview. And I love it. This was never intended to be an encyclopedia, so this isn't just like like let's just rhyme off every single player. Because Joe, we could have had 30 different other Raptors. We could have had 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 other Raptors in this book. It really came down to, and again, being completely frank with you, who got back to us and who was willing to and confirmed that they would actually sit down and chat. But then also guys that we felt that had compelling or interesting stories beyond just, well, they were here for 4 or 5 years. No, there are guys in this book, in fact, a number of them, Bismack Biyombo off the top of my head, Charlie Villanueva, guys that were only, Mike James, guys that were only here for 1 year, but yet they have a great story from either their life, let alone their career, or they were a great personality, or in that 1 year, they really stood out or really seemed to kind of latch on to the fan base. And that was the reasoning behind selecting some of the guys. But to go back to the heavy lifting part of it, honestly, the biggest challenge, I guess, was once a guy confirmed that they liked the idea of the book or that they wanted to be a part of it, it was just trying to find a date and a time, because many of the players, understandably, they weren't as keen to chat in the midst of their season, because obviously, time commitments with practice and games and travel and everything else. And then when the off season would roll around, it was, well, now I'm traveling and I'm taking vacation, or I'm playing catch up time with my significant other or with my children and whatnot. So by the time you're done with that, like, okay, I'll get you later in the summer then. Oh, well, now training camp's starting or off season workouts are starting. So it was trying to find those key moments to really hit on guys. But once we locked them down, Joe, each interview in this book was, I would say the shortest interview was 2 hours. Most of them were 3-4 plus hours. Many of them were over multiple parts. And the 30 guys that committed to this, including Kyle Lowry, who wrote the foreword, and we both felt that it was important to get one of those top 3, top 5, top 10 guys to sort of stamp our thesis and stamp our idea with approval by saying, yes, this book about this collection of, role players and the guy behind the guy, it's legit and it makes sense. So we got Kyle to do that, and kudos to him for stepping up and agreeing to do so. Once they all locked in, though, like I say, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours long, multiple interviews, and like overwhelmingly, each guy completely honest and open and sharing stories that I never even thought that they would get into or that we would even write about, because it really did, with many of the chapters, become less about the X's and O's and less about between the lines and more about their childhood or their collegiate career or an individual or a role model that shaped who they are as a person, as a player, as a man. And we got into some pretty deep and personal discussions that I thought really came out in the pages of the book as well.
So quickly, did you guys write the book first and then shop it around, or did Simon & Schuster come to you and say, "Hey, let's do a book"?
So we got really lucky because, and I promise I'm not saying this with a shred of arrogance. Andrew can check me on this. I was shocked when he came up with the idea. Let's do a book. Then we came up with the actual concept of said book. We brought it to 5 publishers with 4 sample chapters written off of some interviews that I had done previously at the Fan 590, knowing full well that we can't do anything with those interviews. That's property of Rogers. We'll have to redo all of these interviews. If this book ever comes to be, we'll have to redo this. We took these sample chapters to 5 publishers. We got initially 5 offers. So we got an offer from every single publisher. Wow. Then one backed out, and we had to then ultimately decide on the final 4 and break the 4 down to 2 and then the 2 down to 1. And we signed with Simon & Schuster. So at first I'm thinking, oh, this book thing is easy. I never thought it would be this easy, or I was absolutely shocked that we had the response that we did, and we were kind of pinching ourselves at said response. And then Simon & Schuster were awesome to deal with. So once we got the offer, And then they bought into that concept to kind of go back more directly to your point. Well, that's when it really became, well, I'm trying to say something nice here. I don't want to curse and swear on your podcast, Joe, but it became very intense and tense to know that, well, we got to get 30 guys now. We got to come through on this because we promised this. And this is the idea and the concept. We can't come up with 18 or with 22. We need the 30 guys because that's what we were paid to do. So then it became a little more tense over the course of the coming months and over the course of the year, et cetera.
It was your holy shit moment, right?
Well, yeah. Are we allowed to swear? As you work on it, yes, it was. I was going to say it was kind of nut crunching time. It's like we got to get this done now. So yeah, it was definitely the holy shit moment.
That's true.
This was, and I'll also say too, the whole process, because people are always asking, like, how long does it take to write a book or whatever? And from the moment Eric and I started those conversations to getting literary agents, and we can shout out Carolyn and Evelyn at Transatlantic, who absolutely shepherded us through this entire process, to writing the proposal, to getting the offers from publishers, to actually writing and finishing the book, was easily 2.5 years. But when it came to actually writing the book, so starting those interviews and writing, that all happened effectively in an 8-month period, I think. And yeah, there were a lot of sweaty phone calls and text messages between Eric and me, so February rolls around and he's managed, he's like, all right, I got 6 interviews set up. And I'm like, all right, great. We're running now. And then we're kind of getting to June. We have a deadline for when we need the manuscript done. Eric's still trying to get 4 more guys locked in. So I think it was pretty sweaty on both of our ends. And unfortunately, there was nothing I could do to help Eric out. This was all on his plate. And so nut crunching time is right.
Yeah, I love the foreword from Kyle. It was, we all knew that he loved Toronto and never wanted to leave. I don't know if it was like that in the beginning, of course, but you could feel the deep passion that Kyle had. And why did Kyle fit so well here in Toronto?
Well, I think that Joe, you'd have an interesting perspective on this too. I'm going to take over your show for a second and throw it back to you on something. I feel like the Toronto fans, for all sports, Raptors, Leafs, Jays, due respect, I'll throw in the Argos as well, but especially of the major sports in North America, the top 4 major. We don't have the NFL, but of the Leafs, Raptors, and Jays, I think a lot of times, even just forgetting sports for a second, Halifax and Montreal and Quebec City and Winnipeg and Regina and Calgary and Edmonton and Vancouver and pretty much every other city in between, they seem to look at Toronto sometimes like we look at them with our nose up, like Toronto, the elitists in Toronto, the big bad Toronto, the center of the universe when it comes to Canada. I don't think that's accurate, especially when it comes to the sports fan. I don't think the sports fan in Toronto, generally speaking, is the snooty, prim and proper, elitist, white collar. I think Toronto is very much a blue collar city. You can probably come up with even more names than I can, but I've used this reference a couple of times. When I think of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I think of, sure, everybody loves the Stars. They love Austin Matthews and they love Matt Sundin or even a Doug Gilmour. But what about a Wendell Clark? Or what about a Ty Domi? And we can come up with many other muckers and grinders over the years that the Toronto fan base attached themselves and loved. And with the Toronto Blue Jays, go back in the day to a Garth Orge or to a Rance Mulliniks or to a John McDonald or a Kelly Gruber. What about current day? Where would this team be? Yeah, Vladdy, Bo, Joe Carter, Jose Bautista, sure. Ernie Clement, Davis Schneider, Nathan Lucas, the glue guys, the grinders. And that's what I think this book is about. Again, putting that spotlight on those Raptors. Kyle Lowry was one of those guys. In Memphis, in Houston, not a star, came to Toronto, grinder, looking for his place, trying to really establish himself and cement his feet in the league, and then became a star in this city. And I think people really rallied behind him because of that chip on the shoulder that he played with. Because again, I think we appreciate the hard workers and the grinders and the guys that bring their lunch pail to work. We appreciate them in this city much more than I think other people in the country sometimes give Toronto respect for. And I think the Toronto fan base really loves that type of guy. And that's why I think a guy like Kyle stands out amongst all of the all-time greats for the Raptors.
It's interesting. You started the book with Tracy Murray. Murray finally got his chance to play and shine in Toronto. Great player. And as we found out when we had him on the show, a while back, he, like Andrew, was somewhat of an educator. Let's roll that clip there.
The season was unbelievable. It was my best year as a pro. The city was very, very supportive. The cool thing about it is I helped educate the fans, because they're used to hockey.
Right.
The Blue Jays had just won the championship. So it's a little bit different with the NBA. They used to have those popper things behind the basket. And there was one time, they were waving them, right? And we're at the free throw line. I'm at the free throw line, and I'm shooting. And I was asked by a media person, why was I laughing at the free throw line? So I said, okay, education first. First educational point for being a home crowd. When we're at the free throw line, you don't wave them.
So, Eric, in your own experience, I guess those Toronto fans needed a little bit of education.
Yeah, I think early on, some Toronto fans certainly did. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you remember it as well too. Back in the day, back at Skydome when the Raptors first started playing, and they had the court jammed in between first base and home plate. If people can get that image in their mind of what it might have looked like if they never experienced it themselves, it was definitely a learning curve for some folks, and I think that's why. It's wild to think, Joe, that we're now 30 plus years in. Raptors now in the midst of their 31st season. But back in the day, there were a lot of people and executives in the ivory towers in our industry that would say, this isn't going to last. This is a flash in the pan. Basketball doesn't matter in Toronto or in Canada. It's a second-rate sport. This is a hockey city. This is a hockey country, et cetera. And I always thought that was bogus. I mean, I was a guy that grew up with a lot of love and passion for basketball, and I was thrilled to see the NBA in Toronto. So I didn't buy into that theory. I thought it was bogus, and I guess I'm proven right, and a lot of people are proven right 30 years later. But there was very much this feeling or this mentality for Tracy Murray and for Popeye Jones and Doug Christie and Damon Stoudemire and Jean Tabak and Alvin Robertson and all those early season guys, Jimmy King and so many others, that you not only were players, you were spokesmen, you were marketers, you were advertisers, you were advocates, you were teachers, you were help bringing the game to a brand new fan base and to a brand new country, many of whom need to be educated on the finer points of being a fan, let alone the finer points of the X's and O's of the game itself.
Yeah, you brought up Doug Christie, and Doug, one of my favorites. Playing a game. This story is pretty cool. Playing a game of one-on-one against the general manager and knocking him on his butt might have helped him get signed ultimately by the Raptors. That was an interesting story. Did not know about that. Yeah.
I'll let Andrew take that one because I know he had a fun time writing that one back and forth, and we tweaked that one a number of times in terms of just trying to get it right and get the story right with Doug, because it was one that kind of opened my eyes as well. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah. Well, it's worth mentioning, right? So the general manager at that point wasn't just any general manager. It was Isaiah Thomas, right. Former Bad Boys Piston, right? So it's funny, too, because the story tells you, I think, quite a lot about Isaiah Thomas, but it also tells you about Doug Christie. So when he came in for that first run, Isaiah, he was still in his 30s at that point, right? Like still a really young guy. And he liked to test the players. So he said, all right, come on, Doug, give me, let's do a little bit of one-on-one. And Doug, he's got a dog in him, so he's not going to back down, even if it's Isaiah Thomas, this hero of his. So he goes at him, knocks him down, plays with Isaiah pretty rough. And afterwards, his wife is like, what are you doing? That's going to be your new general manager, right? And the reality is like, this clearly didn't hurt Doug's relationship with Isaiah. If anything, Isaiah seems to have liked that Doug was going to go at him, that he had that dog in him, that there was no possibility that in any game of 1-on-1 or 3-on-3 or 5-on-5, Doug Christie wasn't going to give it his all and attack. And I think one of the really cool things about Doug's chapter in the interview we did with him, but this is also the case with lots of those guys from that early expansion era, is how highly they spoke of Isaiah Thomas as a general manager, as someone who is an architect of the team. I think looking back, and definitely at the time, Isaiah Thomas took a lot of heat for how he was building the team, how he was running it. And in many ways, I think Isaiah Thomas really had his hands absolutely handcuffed during that process, something we get into as well in that Tracy Murray chapter, when also ultimately Tracy was unable to re-sign with the Raptors simply because the Raptors couldn't give him a significant raise. So one of the things that was really cool about talking with Doug is that he really saw Isaiah as an innovator, somebody who was seeing the future of the game, trying to work towards a small ball version of the Raptors, trying to think about positionless basketball. And something that Isaiah really wanted was these kind of lanky, versatile, defensively minded, extremely flexible players. And I think this is one of the nice things about writing this book, about interviewing these guys, about getting their perspective on team history, is in some ways, I think it's going to shift the perception of lots of Raptors fans about the history of this team and about really significant moments in the history of this team, including the period during which Isaiah Thomas was at the head.
Mm-hmm. Well, you touched on Vince Carter in the book. Obviously, you have to touch on Vince. How can you not? What were the keys, would you say, to Air Canada's exit? Like, why was Vince kind of? Would you say he was run out of town, or was it a mutual thing?
It's depending on who you talk to, Joe. You still to this day get a different version of the story. I don't think he was run out of town, and I'm not sure even now, sitting here right now, that he wanted to leave. I've had these conversations with Vince himself. We touched on it as best as we could in the book as well. The story that I have heard many times, it wasn't really made public until a couple of years ago, and then it was verified to us when we were writing the book, was that Vince initially made it known that, okay, maybe he's not as happy with his role. Does he want out? We don't know. The Raptors are shipping him. Vince even said to Sam Mitchell, then coach at the time, even if it means that I've got to come off the bench, I want to stay. I'll even be a second unit guy if that's what's going to take. I'll stick around. I want to still be here. And Sam Mitchell goes to then general manager, who unfortunately has now passed, Rob Babcock, and says, Vince wants to stay. He'll even come off the bench. And Rob says, I've already got a handshake agreement. It's not in black and white. It's not pen to paper, but I'm a man of my word. I've got a handshake agreement. The deal is done. We're trading Vince Carter. And that's that. In fact, I honestly, I know this is maybe not great to admit. I don't even remember if this detail is in the book, but Vince flew home with the Raptors even after being traded. He was traded on the road and was still on the team charter, came back to Toronto. I believe even that is a rarity, because there are other cases, and we go into it in our book, of Alvin Williams showing up to a practice, a shoot around in Portland, and being told, get the hell out of here, man. You were traded. You can't be here. This is against the collective bargaining agreement. You can't, like, not that we don't like you, but you can't be here. You've been dealt. Like, you got to get out. But yet Vince Carter is on the team charter flying back even after being traded. So again, there's a lot of gray area when it comes to what ultimately went down with Vince. And I think that's why it took many years for a lot of people, especially a lot of hardcore fans in the fan base, to get over the departure and to maybe accept or embrace or understand or just finally know the quote unquote real story, the true story of how things went down. I think that's why we've kind of come full circle, and it took damn near 20 years to come full circle, where Vince now, and I believe rightfully so, has the 15 raised to the rafters and is back to being sort of this beloved former player in Toronto, like I think he always should have been.
And that's such a great
Raptor statues. He's there. Go ahead.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and that's the thing is, there's no book about the Raptors that you could possibly write where Vince doesn't loom the largest. He's the Raptor, right? Whether you think he's the greatest Raptor of all time or not, when you think of the Toronto Raptors, you think of Vince Carter. So he was going to be in that book no matter what. And I think it's also a little bit inevitable, given how controversial his exit was from the team, that we would need to address that in the book. But again, going back to this thing that we were talking about how we're trying to look at team history a little bit anew through the eyes of these other players. We also spoke to the players about the other giant controversy that accompanied Vince Carter during his time in Toronto. And that was when he decided to fly home for his graduation at the University of North Carolina on the morning of Game 7 of the 2001 Eastern Conference semifinals against the Philadelphia 76ers, a game they ultimately lost. So, this is something that's haunted Vince. I think it still comes. I know Eric can verify this. This topic still comes up when he's on a golf course with fans. They'll say, well, what's the deal with that UNC graduation or whatever, right? And this is almost 25 years on at this point. But when we talk to the players, the Raptors who are on that team, not a single one of them had the same memory that I think looms large over Vince's legacy. Chris Childs, Antonio Davis, even we didn't speak directly with Charles Oakley, but Alvin Williams, all of them recollected Vince coming to them individually, one by one, and saying, I want to go to my graduation. And all of those players giving him their okay. Right. And on top of which, Vince went in the morning. He flew on the private jet of Larry Tannenbaum. He was only going to North Carolina from Philadelphia. He was apparently at the ceremony for like 20 minutes. And then he was back on the plane, back in Philadelphia by noon on game day. And they weren't having a practice. They weren't having a walkthrough or anything. Vince did his full prep. And these guys made a really, really important point, which is, they don't make it to Game 7 without Vince. He had an absolutely phenomenal semifinals run. And so for them, there's no second guessing Vince. And I'm hoping that's one thing that our book can do, which is help to rewrite that legacy, especially the darker moments that surround Vince's career, because he really is kind of the Raptor when you think about team history. And I think it's probably for the best of the team, the best of Vince, but also the best of all of the fans to recognize what that legacy actually should be.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because he had a hell of a game too. I mean, he missed that last shot, of course, but he had a hell of a game, an incredible series. And as you say, there was really, the private jets, hope there at noon. And like, what? If you didn't know he was at a graduation for 20 minutes, you would have never known. And he would have never cared. You just thought, Joe, he had a hell of a game. Just missed that one shot.
The usual for fans. I mean, whether hockey fans, basketball fans, or otherwise, generally speaking, there's either a morning shoot around in basketball or the morning skate in hockey, and that's generally what happens unless the team is coming off a game the night before and they're playing on the second night of a back-to-back. Then almost every hockey team, every basketball team will cancel the morning shoot around or the morning skate. So all the guys do is literally sit around and sleep all day and maybe gather as a team at lunch and go through some video and some tape and whatnot. And then they're left to their own vices in the afternoon as well. Sleep, nap, get prepped, leave for the game at 4:30, 5 o'clock for a 7 or 7:30 tip-off or puck drop or otherwise. But the other one, when I say second night of the back-to-back, the other scenario is when there's an early tip or early puck drop. So let's just deal with basketball and stop talking hockey. Any game in basketball, I'm telling you, whether it's a 3:30 or a 5 o'clock or a 6 o'clock, if it's not 7 p.m. Eastern or later, 99.99% of the time, teams will cancel their morning shoot-around. So that game in Philadelphia, I believe, was a 5 p.m. tip-off. There was no morning shoot-around. So Vince Carter, Alvin Williams, Jerome Williams, Antonio Davis, Chris Childs, Charles Oakley, all the rest, all they're doing is hanging out in their hotel room in Philadelphia, prepping for Game 7. And again, maybe meeting together for a lunch or something, maybe. Otherwise, see you at the gym, probably 2.5, 3 hours, the gym being the arena, 2.5, 3 hours before. But the way, to Andrew's point, that this narrative has been written is that Vince flies to North Carolina, attends the ceremony, flies back. The game's about to start. He's putting on his jersey as he's walking onto the floor. The game's about to start, and Vince is blowing in the back door. Oh my! Like exactly. The guy was back in the city 5 hours before tip-off and was as prepared as anybody else was for the game. And every single one of the guys gave their blessing or their nod of approval for him to do so, including the organization itself with him flying on the owner's jet. So,
Larry Tannenbaum's jet.
So again, to Andrew's point, I think hopefully people in reading this can get a little bit of a different perspective and get the facts a little more than perhaps they've had over the years.
Yeah. So you've talked a bit about Alvin Williams, a guy who never got a sniff anywhere. Finally got his chance to shine here. And of course, you got a chance to work with Boogie. What made him so special?
He's just a great guy. I mean, he is to this day. Super down to earth, really personable, self-deprecating, easygoing. Like I'm trying to avoid cliche here, but he truly is just like an everyday guy. And solid upbringing, great parents. And I think he was just kind of a mature guy that was grounded from a relatively early age. And even the fact, Joe, that when he came here, and Andrew can maybe piggyback on this a little bit, when he came to Toronto from Portland and he was involved in that Damon Stoudemire deal, even that was in a shroud of controversy at the time because Kenny Anderson was coming over from the Portland Trailblazers with Alvin and Gary Trent Sr. And Gary Trent Sr. was at the time known for being a pretty rough around the edges guy and a guy that had a chip on his shoulder about seemingly everything. And Kenny Anderson wanted no part of being here and made it be known he was not going to come to Toronto and not play for the Raptors. And then there's this young dude, Alvin Williams, that's just trying to get his feet and plant himself somewhere in the NBA. And he comes to Toronto and he's given a bit of an opportunity, but then really can't seem to get things going under Butch Carter. And not that they butted heads, but Butch didn't seem to have an appreciation for what Alvin could bring, or maybe didn't see it as early. And then once he finally started to give Alvin a little bit of a taste, Alvin's career started to kind of gain some momentum. But it's when the now late, and we just unfortunately lost him, but the now late Lenny Wilkens, it took a Hall of Famer to come in and see the work ethic, the attitude, the leadership, the approach, the grinder grit mentality of an Alvin Williams, and how that could fit and mesh with the other pieces that Toronto had at the time, especially this young budding star in Vince Carter. And it was, again, a Hall of Famer that unlocked an Alvin Williams. And I think Alvin has never lost that appreciation and that respect for what Lenny Wilkens did for him and how he might not have had a career in the NBA if not for one of the all-time great point guards in NBA history seeing something in him. So if Lenny Wilkens can stamp approval on Alvin Williams, my stamp of approval means absolutely nothing. But I think everybody should just get in line behind Lenny Wilkens, and Alvin certainly proved himself 10 times over. Now think of a guy who has been a player for the Raptors, been a scout for the Raptors, been in player development for the Raptors, been an assistant coach of the Raptors, worked in management with the Raptors, and now a broadcaster for the Raptors. Like, this guy is as Canadian as any of us. And I know he absolutely adores and still loves being in this country and would probably, willingly and lovingly have a passport if he could get one.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book too, a lot of guys really enjoyed coming here. We're a little skeptical often, but once they got here, wow. Talking about Alvin too, you pointed out that Chris Childs was significant in his development as well. Tell us how.
I don't know, Andrew. Do you want to jump in on that one or no? Because
you know what? I'd like you to talk about Chris Childs in part because it's another story of a guy getting an opportunity and really trying to earn it, but also it's I think behind the scenes a really great example of how committed these players were to the Raptors and the history of the team. So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So Joe, again, being completely honest with you and your audience, there are a number of players in this book that. Like, I can sit here and tell you that I've been covering the team in some way, shape, or form since season 2. I've been broadcasting or working on the broadcast in some way, shape, or form since year 4. I'm now in my 21st season as the play-by-play broadcaster of the team. Having said all that, I can probably name you on one hand 5 at most guys that I would say that I'm, quote, friends with. I'm professionally friendly with a number of players and have a working relationship with a number of guys. And I think that's in part why so many guys felt comfortable in talking and sharing their stories for this book. But it's not like I'm out there bosom buddy with all these guys and, we're hanging out. No, that's not the case. It's a professional relationship. The reason I mention that is I did not have much of a relationship with Chris Childs at all I'm not sure that he even remembered me from his brief time in Toronto when I was still a young dude and kind of in my relative infancy in my career, let alone in covering this team. But I hope that he at least had a little bit of a nugget of who I am if he saw my face, or maybe he even asked people about, hey, is this guy, should I talk to him? Should I be involved in this book or something? Because he agreed to do the interview. And then when he did said interview, it became multiple interviews. If I'm not mistaken, he might have been the longest interview of all when we add all of the multiple interviews. In fact, I believe the first time we spoke was in June of 24, and in October of 24, months after we spoke, and the chapter had pretty much been written already, I'm in Montreal at Raptors training camp. Again, this is October of 24, and I'm out with a friend in Montreal, couple of drinks, and it's after midnight. My phone rings. Chris Childs. The hell? Should I answer this? I mean, wasn't drunk, but I had a couple of beers. I'm like, oh, should I answer this? It's midnight. It's like midnight on a Thursday. I'm like, yeah, I mean, if he's calling me, there's got to be something up. Hello, Eric, it's Chris. You got time to talk? Like, yeah, sure. It's after midnight. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I step out of the bar that I'm in and I go into a little alley in Montreal, and Chris says, I thought of something else, a few things I want to share with you. Can we talk? Okay, here we go. And I spent probably a good 45 minutes at least, if not an hour, in an alley in Montreal at midnight at 12:30, whatever, talking to Chris Childs because he wanted to open up and share more. And what I found extremely not only interesting, but impressive, and it kind of hit a chord with me, and I think Andrew, as we were then writing the chapter, the honesty that he showed, that Chris Childs showed, and the vulnerability that he showed in admitting to us that not only was he battling substance abuse and alcoholism and addiction, he really felt that his life was in jeopardy at times because of the demons that he was battling and the impact that it had on his family, his wife, his children, and how waking up in his kid's bed one morning was sort of a wake-up call in having a conversation with his then very young child that, like, I need to get my life straight. If I forget about even my career, I need to get my life straight. And a longtime collegiate coach, longtime professional coach, a guy who was a former Raptor assistant coach as well, the legendary John Lucas, was the one that kind of pulled Chris up by the bootstraps and got him into a substance abuse program, a sobriety program, got his life on track for Chris before then Chris was able to, via John Lucas as well, getting his career on track and then ultimately not only get an NBA contract, but then stay in the NBA and have a long career. And then as part of that career being with the Raptors, his first year in Toronto was a year removed from the Raptors losing to the New York Knicks in the first round of the playoffs with Chris Childs in New York, to then a year later, Chris Childs bringing some of the blueprints and some of the plays from New York into a Toronto practice and saying, hey, we're going to beat my former team and I'm going to help you guys be a part of it. And another veteran voice in the locker room for an Alvin Williams, but especially for a Vince Carter, alongside the fellow vets of Charles Oakley and Del Curry and Antonio Davis, and the list goes on. And Childs, I think, was a key part of being that glue for the Raptor team that was that close to making it to the Eastern Conference Final. And maybe, who knows, like Kobe Bryant once said in an interview, Joe, that if the Raptors had beaten Philadelphia, he believed, Kobe, that Toronto would have steamrolled through the Milwaukee Bucks and it would have been the Raptors and the Lakers in the final that year. And can you imagine a Raptor team less than a decade in the league facing off Vince Carter against Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal in the finals? Like, again, it's a what if, it's a wild, but I think Chris Childs was a part of that very special time for that young Raptor squad, or again, that young Raptor core with Vince Carter at the helm.
What a great comeback story too. I mean, it's incredible. Chris is a phenomenal story. Okay, so Matt Bonner, I got emotional when I read about the Red Rockets dad, meeting him in the tunnel for his pro debut. I mean, that was incredible. And here's another guy who came to Toronto and stayed and still here and on broadcasts and everything else. And there seems to be a little bit of that, It's quite a bit of that, isn't there?
I think there's a lot of that in this book. Again, and the idea of getting a little bit touched by these stories, I can fully identify with. Last night, Eric and I were doing a bit of a family and friends book launch. And at one point, I grabbed the mic and I said, one of the things that's meaningful for me about this book is the openness with which the players shared their stories. And and to my own surprise, I could feel myself kind of getting a little broken up. I think part of this is, a few years back, 10 years ago or something, I watched the Paddington film on a flight by mistake, which opened up my tear ducts. And ever since then, I haven't been able to stop crying. But it was one of these things where as somebody who's not in the sports media, right? As somebody who has met very few basketball players in person during my life, they can seem like gods. They can seem very distant. And we don't get a lot of access to basketball players today, in particular, through the kinds of interviews they do after games, right? Like some guys running around for 2.5 hours and then somebody comes up to him and says, okay, now relay your emotions about what you were feeling during that game. And predictably and understandably, those players say all the usual stuff. Oh, we were working hard together. It's a team game. It was all about rebounding. Our defense showed up, right? I don't think there's a ton of insight in those kinds of comments. But with players like Chris Childs, and this was definitely the case with Matt Bonner, who I think Eric will agree is probably the best storyteller, not just in this book, but potentially in the NBA. They were open with us. They told us these incredibly personal things. And I think the story about Matt's dad is one of the really great ones. Eric and I were talking yesterday about Matt's chapter. And the fact is, his dad is all over that chapter. He's there when Matt's growing up. He's there supporting Matt's ambition. He's there when Matt ends up for a season overseas before he starts with the Raptors. And he's there for opening tip-off the night of Matt's first game. And you are not alone in pointing to that moment when Matt's running down the tunnel and he sees his dad, who somehow has magically finagled his way down to the tunnel, waiting for him. Tears streaming down his dad's face, giving him a high five as Matt runs on the court for his first ever NBA game. And I think there's like a bunch of moments like that in this book. And for me, again, as someone who loves basketball, but is not on the inside of the NBA, moments like that were absolutely revelatory and admittedly incredibly touching.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So many guys like Patrick Patterson started out with, get me out of here now. Yeah. We're never wanting to leave, right? Jesus. Well, can I stay, please?
Yeah, and Joe, you wrap it up perfectly. I think I've told the Patrick Patterson story, and it's taken me 5 minutes to tell a story. You just did it in 10 seconds, so kudos to you. But that's essentially what it was. It was sitting in a movie theater in Sacramento with his mother, and both of their phones are blowing up as they're trying to watch a movie. I can't even remember. Was it Lord of the Rings or something? Anyway,
No. It wasn't Lord of the Rings. It was
Paddington.
It was Paddington.
I can't remember. No. Hunger Games. Hunger Games. Yeah. I knew it was one of those kinds of movies, whatever. But their phones are blowing up, and he gets out of the theater, and his mom is basically telling him, like, no, you're going to go, and you're going to make the best of it, and you're lucky to be a professional athlete, and just put your head down and do your job. And he kind of took his mom's advice, but then upon getting here, and I even said this to him in the interview, I said, Pat, I remember you were kind of bristly at first to talk to. You weren't that much of an a-hole, but like you could tell there was a little bit of an edge there. And, in scrums and whatnot, like, what's up with this guy? And he fully admitted, I came to do a job and I was getting the hell out. And I already told my agent, reroute me as quick as possible. But then what happens? The Raptors start winning. They turn their season around. They become a playoff team. Patrick sees springtime roll around in Toronto, and all of a sudden it's not cold and it's not snowing. It's like a carpet has been rolled out, and people are coming out like termites out of the woodwork. They're now on the street and they're on patios, and the city's coming alive. And he said, man, I just instantly fell in love with the place, both on and off the floor. Signs a long-term extension, stays here, ultimately ends up getting dealt away, never wanted to leave, but came even more so full circle by marrying a Canadian girl, has now a daughter with dual citizenship, has a business and a business partner who's one of his closest friends from Toronto and in Toronto, and is regularly back in the city, like regularly back in Toronto. And that doesn't happen if not for that trade. And it doesn't happen if not for him and his attitude and his approach of recognizing, man, I was dead wrong. I didn't want to be here, but then I did. And the best times of my life, arguably, but certainly of my career, came in Toronto and when I was a Raptor. And I think we heard that from so many guys, but Pat was certainly one of those guys that stands out in terms of his story specifically.
Yeah. Caribana's been a big selling feature for all of these guys. Eh?
I was waiting for that to come up, right? I think Eric and I, we have a couple of little mini chapters throughout the book, what we call Raptors moments, focusing on various things, including that Vince game after the UNC graduation, the Raptors Cavs series in the Eastern Conference Finals in 2016. And we thought, oh my God, should there be a little mini chapter about the role of Caribana in the history of the Raptors? Because we knew that lots of the players liked it, but interview after interview after interview, when guys were telling the story, okay, I got traded to Toronto, I got drafted by Toronto, or I got drafted and then traded to Toronto. I didn't know anything about Toronto. I'd visited for a few games maybe, or they'd never been there at all, had no impressions. And they show up, especially if it's the off season in summer, and Caribana's going on. And they said, what is this? What are these costumes? Amazing food everywhere, event rafts everywhere. And they said, you know what? Toronto might be a pretty good city. And it's sort of like this running narrative throughout all of those interviews. How many of the guys talked about Caribana?
Yeah, it's a great city. It's an amazing city. And once they get a taste of that, they just don't want to leave. And then, of course, the Canadian guys, right? Jamal McGlory finally getting a chance to play here, and Corey Joseph getting a chance to play here. You got some really good nuggets from those guys.
Yeah, and RJ Barrett on that list as well, Joe. It's going to, I think I said this earlier, it's going to sound somewhat cliche, but for all three of them, it was just such a thrill to be able to play for the hometown team. Corey from Pickering and Jamal, a Scarborough guy, RJ Mississauga. But for all of them, it was such a thrill to have that maple leaf on their chest. And for a guy like Corey, to have the success that he had in San Antonio and then to be this close to doing it in Toronto. And then Jamal came for his last year in his career and didn't get a chance to taste the title as a player, but then was still here with the Raptors as an assistant coach when the Raptors win the title in 2019. So he was able to do so as a member of the squad. And he's got that ring now and got it with Toronto. And RJ now trying to chase the same, but the success he's had in his career in New York and now Toronto, or even internationally with Team Canada, trying to do it in front of the friends and family in his hometown, but then doing so under the horrific cloud of his first season in Toronto and his brother passing away, and yet another deeply personal story. Like, even when you think of two of the three guys that we just spoke of, Jamal McGlory's brother being murdered, very young in his life, and Jamal trying to get through that, and still to this day, it's an unsolved case in the city of Toronto, let alone then what RJ dealt with his brother getting sick and passing so quickly. So there's so many personal connections to these players. Again, I keep saying on the floor, but also off the floor, and the way that they opened up about the moments in their lives, just like all of us. And that's what I think we often forget too, Joe. And we can say this about most athletes is, and I'm guilty of it to this day still. Because of the amount of money that's out there, I never begrudged the guy for getting the money. Good for you. I only wish I could be in that category. I only wish I had that God-given talent or had the drive and the work ethic at a young age to have been in a position to be where these guys are financially. But at the end of the day, they got to do groceries and they got to put their pants on one leg at a time, and they've got the same issues at home. They might have a little bit more money to help maybe pay for a little bit more help. Their houses may or may not be a little bit bigger. Their cars might be a little bit better or more expensive, but they're breathing the same air we are. And unfortunately, they still deal with the same personal conflicts away from the court, away from the job that we all do. And if you can look past the dollar figures, they're just regular people. They're just human beings that have a lot of stuff. And that's why I've taken, just not to get too fluffy about this, but away from the book itself. And I feel like, Joe, even watching you over the years and the way that you've approached things is trying to see athletes as people and recognize that even when a guy has a bad night, there might be a hell of a lot of reasons for it. It might be that he just stunk that night. It might be that he wasn't prepared. It might be that his career is on the downward spiral or downward trajectory. Or it might be he didn't get a lot of sleep because his kid was sick. Or he didn't have time to prep properly because one of his parents is ill. Or there's something going on in his life. Or what's one of the big things that rightfully so and understandably so has really come to the front in the last, decade plus? Maybe mentally somebody just wasn't there, and the mental health aspect. So there's so many variables and factors that go into an athlete, just like all of us. But I think because of what we do in sports broadcasting, or certainly what we are as sports fans, we forget about that. It's just about, did you win? Did you lose? Did you hit the shot or miss the shot? No, these people are still individuals. And I think we often forget that. And I hope that came through in so many chapters of the book, that you see these people as men, as humans, not just as athletes.
Yeah, very easy to judge, but until you've walked in somebody else's shoes, you really haven't got a clue. And as you mentioned, so many of us suffer from mental illness in one way or another. I want to talk about 2019, but I want to set this up a little bit. So the Raps are on their way to the title after a huge Game 3 win in Oakland. And Eric, you interviewed a key piece to that victory. Let's roll that, Dave. Eric.
Down in Oakland tonight, Eric Smith caught up with Danny Green post-game.
Danny, you and I were talking before the game. You said that the defense has been fine. It's a way to get the offense going, and maybe the defense feeding the offense. Did you do that tonight?
I think we did a better job for sure. Took care of it, didn't turn over as much. Got some better shots, but there was some lapses, some lows, and we can't let Steph get off like that, like he did. We knew we were going to beat him by himself, but we got to do a better job containing him and the others. But offensively, we got a chance to move, run, got some rhythm, guys got some open, uncontested looks, and we finally shot pretty decent tonight.
So Danny, of course, is in the book. A lot of people looked at Danny as sort of a throw-in in the Kawhi deal, but talk a little bit about his significance.
Well, it's funny, too, because with due respect to the people that think that this guy was a throw-in, I think a NBA champion and a key cog with what San Antonio was doing, and a guy who ended up starting every game for the Raptors in the regular season and playoffs, that is the furthest freaking thing from a throw-in that I can find. I mean, you acquired 40% of your starting lineup in that trade, Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green. Danny Green was massive to what the Raptors did over the course of the regular season. And he had a couple of rough stretches in the postseason, especially initially early on in the actual NBA Finals. But they don't get to, not with due respect, not to put Danny on the same pedestal as Vince, but to use the comparison of back in the day, back in 01, 02, you don't get to where you are with Vince Carter. You're not where you're at without Danny Green and his leadership and his experience, his voice in the locker room, his shot making. And people forget as well, one of the former great defensive players in the league. Was he a little bit slower, and was he as defensive minded or as accurate and dialed in, perhaps, as a defender with Toronto as he was early in his career? No, but was he still very capable? Absolutely. And I think Danny, the cool thing with Danny was to think about as it relates to everything we were just discussing with Canada and the book itself and whatnot. 1 year in Toronto, one and done, unfortunately. He also did not want to leave. He wanted to stick around. And before he left town, he went on his own private sort of cross-country tour. I know for a fact that he went to like Winnipeg for an appearance and spent a few days in Manitoba wanting to see the province, and ended up in Alberta, and he was out in BC. He wanted to see the country, and still regularly comes back, despite 1 year in Toronto, regularly comes back. And he's now won 3 titles. His career is over. He's now retired. He won a title with the Lakers. He won a title in Toronto. He won a title with San Antonio. But he's told us that title in Toronto maybe stands out that much more because of what it meant to not just the city, but to the entire country. And then to also discuss what I don't even know if we ever got a final number, 2.5, 3 million people at the parade, the insanity that was the celebration after that one. He said, again, respect to San Antonio, respect to LA. What I experienced in Toronto could never be duplicated in terms of the way that we were embraced at that parade and during that finals run.
Yeah, that finals run, it got scary. They split the first 2 games at home. And the talk was get back to Oakland and maybe let's get a split. And Kawhi said, F that. Let's get them both. That's the winning attitude, right, that we're looking for. So calling those Raptors games, Eric, and it can't get better than this. We have the Game 6 call in Oakland, end of the game. Eric on the mic. Let's pick that up, Vic.
The Toronto Raptors are NBA champions. A city, a province, a country celebrates. The NBA championship is due north.
Beautiful. How long did you rehearse that before it happened? What was the deal on that one? Were you ready? Or just came off the cuff? Tell us about it.
It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't written down, but I had this idea in my head. And Andrew, I don't know if you remember this or not. I think we've probably discussed this, but Joe, what I was trying to avoid in coming up with something in my brain was 1992 when the Blue Jays win the World Series.
Right.
The U.S. broadcast was, for the first time ever, the World Series flag will fly north or something to that effect.
North of the border. So, Bob Costas.
Yeah, fly north of the border.
Right.
So in remembering that and knowing that, you can't basically do the exact same call. But we don't have an NFL team in Canada. And obviously with now 7 NHL franchises and multiple Canadian teams have won the Stanley Cup, it's irrelevant. So for the Raptors in the NBA, this is the first time. So how do you say for the first time ever when that's already been said, almost 30 years earlier in baseball? So then trying to tie in the We the North that the Raptors had been rallying behind for a number of years, and then tying in even, little did I know in 2019 that we'd be writing a book all these years later. But what have we been discussing? The way that the city and the province, but even more so the country, has embraced this team. How can I encapsulate that? And then the whole jersey that the Raptors were wearing there, that the chevron that the Raptors have on their jersey is meant to be the arrow pointing north. Even though people in Portland still call out the Raptors and say, technically speaking, if we look at longitude and latitude, and we are actually further north on a map than Toronto. So trying to tie that in, the due north it's not just due north, but it's due north. I'm not really much of a mapologist or whatever, but I do know a little bit of the terminology. So that was a little time, but it's not like I had a Post-it note. And what made it very difficult, quite honestly, to even have that call is if you remember Game 6, the final 15, 20 seconds took about 5 minutes because there was a loose ball and players diving for it. And then there was a foul called and there was free throws. And was there a timeout called? And then there was Kawhi going to the line. And so it was, you're about to give that moment. You're like, oh crap, I can't say it yet because the game's not actually over. You had to wait. So there wasn't that penultimate moment or a missed shot or a made shot. It was really Kawhi ices the game at the free throw line and puts Toronto up 4, and then the Warriors inbound it and heave the ball down the floor. And now finally, mercifully, the game is over and you can have that call. But it was a little melodramatic or didn't have a lot of high intensity to it. So you sort of had to bring that moment up, and hopefully I was able to do so with that call. I don't want to sound like an a-hole here, but even I still got a little bit of shivers hearing that because it's kind of fun. It's cool to hear that after all these years.
Oh, it's beautiful, man. That was so much fun. Andrew, what do you remember about that time?
What I remember is not being able to go to the games. So I remember, I get kind of lucky with the work I do that I tend to be in North America, usually around June for conferences and stuff like that. So typically I get to watch a fair amount of playoff basketball and then definitely the finals. But at that point, it was only maybe about a year and a half since I'd moved to Belgium. So I was in Belgium. I was so excited about the Raptors. I was watching in the middle of the night, setting an alarm, getting up, turning on the game. And my nephew, Eric's son, Eric, I don't know if you remember this. You guys had some tickets for the game, right? And I think you were, sending some of our friends and family to the game, but also selling off a couple of them. And Jackson, my nephew, your son, sent me a text message and said, "Oh, Uncle Andrew, I think we have an extra game to one of the Toronto matchups." And I immediately, he hadn't checked with either Eric or his mother yet before offering the ticket. And I immediately said, "You got it, buddy." And I go on, I start looking at flights right away. I find an Air Transat flight leaving, like 400 euros round trip, middle of the night. I'm like, I'm going to a Raptors game. This is incredible.
And by the way, Joe, my son is 9 at the time when he's doing this, by the way. So that's it.
Okay. So if anything, I'm the one who I showed a lack of maturity and trusting the 9-year-old to be in charge of the NBA Finals tickets. But But I was hoping against hope, and it turns out that ticket actually wasn't available. So for me, it was a lot of celebrating in the middle of the night. But what's kind of interesting is that's actually how I celebrated, I think it was the 1993 World Series when the Jays won it back in Toronto. My parents had already gone to bed. It was late at night. It was a long game. And I was sitting there in the dark watching the game. And when the Jays finally won, it was me by myself in the living room, quietly jumping up and down as I think probably like a 12-year-old around that point, going like, "We won. And of course, trying not to make noise, but jumping up and down. Of course, my father comes down the stairs and he's like, we can actually hear you jumping. It doesn't matter if you're yelling or not. But he gave me a high five, Bonner dad style. And it's one of my great memories of being a Toronto fan, much in the same way. That's one of my great memories of 2019 is watching that team win in the middle of the night back in Belgium.
Joe, I'm going to jump in again for a second.
You and Jonesy.
Yeah.
Right. After the game, here, you guys being there from the beginning, wondering this would ever happen. And here you are at Oracle and everything's happening in front of you, right?
Yeah. I mean, so I feel like I've said this a couple of times. Andrew's heard me say this. I'm gonna break my arm, patting myself on the back here. I'm saying that tongue in cheek. I'm quite proud of the fact that Paul and I, it doesn't get talked a lot about, nor should it. Because, hey, at the end of the day, we got a job to do and we love the job we have. But we are the longest serving broadcast duo in franchise history. Paul and I are still together right now in our 21st season together calling games. And I think that's got to put us amongst one of the longest serving broadcast duos in Canadian sports. And to have my partner and my friend alongside me all these years and still to this day, it's been a pleasure. It's been a joy working with Jonesy. He's a great person, let alone analyst. And to know that he's also an OG, he's a day oneer with the Raptors. I told you I started covering in some way, shape, or form in year 2. Paul's an original from day one. There's only a handful, Paul Jones, Leo Routens, Doug Smith writing for the Toronto Star. There are very few people that are day oneers. So to be able to experience that with Paul, and as the play-by-play guy, I become the sort of de facto host in a sense as soon as the game ends in Oakland in Game 6. So I've got to kind of be the traffic cop, which enables Paul as the analyst to take the headset off and take the wireless microphone and go down to the floor. And I fully admit I'm jealous now because I'm, for almost a decade wearing the dual hat of doing play-by-play on the radio, but doing sideline reporting on TV as well, as you saw with that Danny Green interview. So if I was on the TV side for that game, well, I don't get the final call, but I'm now doing all those player interviews and I'm amongst the confetti and the fun and the celebration. So Paul got that moment. And I fully admit there's a slight little tiny bit of jealousy that I couldn't be down there with him. But I was so happy for him that he got to be down there and I'm throwing down. Let's go now. Paul's now got Bobby Webster, the GM. He's got Masai Ujiri. He's got Kyle Lowry. And Paul's down there just giddy, just like a schoolboy amongst the celebration. And then we both put down the headset when we finally signed off and go into the locker room, and we're doing various post-game interviews for NBA TV and for Sportsnet and whatnot, and getting sprayed with champagne and literally walking through a river of champagne all over the dressing room floor. and you put up the picture earlier of myself and Kyle Lowry standing there with the NBA trophy. I mean, there I am about maybe 90 minutes, 2 hours after the game. And so that was at the old arena in Oakland, at Oracle Arena. And for folks that don't know, that old arena at Oracle, it was on the same complex or the same grounds as the baseball stadium where the Oakland Athletics used to play and the Oakland Raiders. And the two buildings, the arena and the stadium, were connected by a bunch of tunnels and hallways and dressing rooms and whatnot underneath, like in the bowels of said buildings. So after the game, Raptors win the title. Their locker room is just obviously chaos with the champagne, and it's just completely brutalized. But the NBA has in the Oakland Raiders locker room a whole photo studio set up for the players and the coaches and management and friends and family and you name it, to take official, proper photos, professional photos with the title. And the trophy is there. And I am absolutely indebted and grateful to the organization where they invited the team broadcasters to come in, and we were last in line, as we should be. Like we wait until the very last person, but we'd love for you to come in and have a chance to get a picture with the title. And there's, again, me and Kyle, and we had a picture, myself and Jonesy had a chance to take a photo together with the championship trophy. And months later, this isn't, I don't believe in the book. It's not in the book. But months later, Joe, it was December 29th of 2019. I had the NBA championship trophy at my house. And the team was again, we were last, as we should be. I can't even believe we were on the list. But after the players and after the coaches and after everybody else, they said, yep, team broadcasters, you were part of this. You helped bring the message of our team, out to the audience, TV and radio otherwise. So I had a kind of private friends and family party at my house. And Andrew, unfortunately, wasn't there because he was overseas. But we had the NBA championship trophy in my house. My kid had it in bed with him. It was on the dining room table. It was on the couch. The dog was taking a picture with it. Like, I mean, it was incredible. And I actually was again, unbelievably fortunate and extremely, extremely grateful to the organization that I got a championship ring as well. So that sits upstairs in a very secure place, but I have and it's got my name on it and everything, an NBA championship ring. And it's something that I don't know if it'll ever happen again. I hope it happens 2, 3, 4, 5 times before my career is over, let alone my life is over, but who knows, right? And to go back to the story of Andrew and my son and the ticket and whatever else, my son and wife were in attendance for Game 5. And if you remember Game 5 in Toronto, after you said it, Toronto went to Golden State and got both games and had a 3-1 lead, and then had a lead with about 90 seconds at home. And I look up, and my kid and my wife were in the first row of the upper deck, right by the tunnel. I was working sidelines for that broadcast for Game 5. And I looked up and I thought, holy shit, my kid is going to see a championship in his lifetime. Like, forget about the Leafs in 1967. Yeah, I was alive, but not in attendance. Yeah. He's going to be in attendance for a championship. I can't believe this. And then they blow it. I felt horrible. I'm like, oh my God, my kid, he was that close to seeing it live and in person. And then we all went through the same heartache this year, just most recently with the Toronto Blue Jays, Game 7. Like, oh, so close. But he can always hang on to, even if it never happens again, 2019 and the Toronto Raptors and being a part of that. And the fact that he got to live it through his dad as well, with having the actual trophy in his house and a championship ring. He's been so close to it. And hopefully that's something that he can take throughout his life, that we were lucky enough and fortunate enough and privileged enough to be so close to so many of these moments.
Yeah, we were at Game 5 against Atlanta in 1992.
Oh, amazing!
And unfortunately, we were at Game 5 against Atlanta in Toronto. They lost that game. The same thing, 3-1 at home. Chance to wrap it up. The Jays didn't, but and you mentioned that it could happen a few more times, and things are looking up. And this, this is a team that was 1-4. All of a sudden, it's 8-5.
Yeah, they've won 7 of their last 8. I think that, and Andrew and I touched on it a little bit towards the end of the book. That's why both of us, Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, we kind of struggled with Andrew mentioned earlier, Joe, the various eras that we sort of broke down over the course of the book. This era right now is sort of like championship era and beyond, because it was still a very good team for a couple of years. People forget because of the unfortunate pandemic and everything that happened to the world, but the Raptors were among the top 2-3 teams in the NBA. And there was every reason to believe that they had a very good chance to repeat even without Kawhi Leonard. They were still incredible that season. And then when they finally did restart the bubble and down in Orlando, it was a Game 7, essentially buzzer beater, like came down to the wire against the Boston Celtics. And unfortunately, Toronto gets eliminated. But, you play that woulda, coulda, shoulda game. If it weren't for the pandemic and the Raptors still had momentum rolling, would things have been different? Could they have gone on a run? Could they have repeated? We come back the next year. Toronto is in the playoffs, right? And then all of a sudden, it kind of goes away. And there's been a couple of lean years. But how much of that played into the fact that the Raptors, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but they spent an entire season away from Toronto playing down in Tampa, then came back home and played major chunks of their season to an empty arena when the rest of the league and the other 29 markets in the U.S., and we can argue whether this was the right call in the U.S. or not, but we're playing in full packed arenas with the fan base and everything else. There were 2 years that the Raptors had a ton to deal with, a hand that was dealt to them that nobody else in the league had. And how much did that factor into the losses and to the team kind of being on the skids? So that's why I think this is an interesting era where, yes, they've taken some lumps and they hit a couple of speed bumps, but they're on that upwards trajectory again. And I think, and Andrew, I think agrees that this team could be maybe not championship caliber right now, but I think definitely playoff caliber. And I think they're on the right path and they're definitely on the rise.
100%. I'm so excited about what this team looks like. I know they had a really tough start at the beginning of the season, but I think that a lot of that was related to the fact that Jakob Poeltl was out with back spasms, and they're otherwise a pretty small team. I guess maybe just to really quickly, talking about this team, talking about the depth of this team, I think it's worth shouting out, in particular, Garrett Temple, who's featured in the book as well. And I was out with a buddy in Toronto for beers, and we were talking about the Raptors, and he's like, well, why is Garrett Temple on the team even? Like, what does Garrett Temple do? And I think it's easy for people not following the team closely or interacting with the team, it's easy for them to miss what it is that someone like Garrett Temple contributes as effectively an assistant coach who wears a uniform on the bench. And I was at one of those early games in the season when the Raptors were facing Houston. Houston's a huge team. Poeltl was out that game, and they were just getting killed on the boards. I think they got out rebounded 3-1 by the end of the game. It was a really tough loss. And one of the guys who was getting it hardest of all was Colin Murray Boyles. And I was up in the stands, up on the 300 level, front row with Jackson. And so we could see right down onto the Raptors bench. And Colin gets called for a foul, another tough foul. Darko pulls him out of the game, and he's walking back to the bench, his head hung a little bit. And the first guy to get up is Garrett Temple. And Garrett Temple walks right up to him and says, listen, you can see he's kind of trying to coach him up. That's a tough foul. That's a hard one. And for the next 5 minutes, Garrett Temple is positioning his body as a kind of defensive specialist against Colin Murray Boyle's body and saying, look at this, look at that, kind of showing him the angles, how to take on a larger defender or a larger rebounder when you're down in the post. And at the end of that little speech, I could see, Colin Murray Boyles perk up just a little bit, Garrett Temple give him a pat on the chest and sort of say, like, you're going to get him next time. And I think that's the kind of stuff that's going to help this team move towards the playoff, move towards being potentially a championship level squad. Of course, it's great to have Brandon Ingram there. He's taking a lot of scoring pressure off the rest of the guys. But I think it goes all the way down the bench. And I think that's part of the vision that Darko had for this team as well when bringing Garrett Temple in.
Yeah, CMB is becoming a force, no doubt about it. And didn't he miss a few games in the beginning too?
A couple. He was definitely struggling though too, and he's kind of turned things around. Over the course of the last couple of weeks. I mean, it's just they're coming together. They're gelling, and let's be honest too, Joe. The Eastern Conference right now not exactly world beaters, from top to bottom, like you maybe see in the Western Conference. But at the end of the day, and I know I've said this a few times over the course of our conversation, at the risk of sounding cliche, you've got to play the games that are in front of you. The schedule is what it is, and take advantage of it while you can. Because even as we speak right now, the stretch of games that the Raptors have coming up before the end of November and even into early December, there are a lot of winnable ball games coming up for Toronto. And it wouldn't surprise me if they take care of business like they should. You could easily see this team being 5-6 games above 500 in relatively quick fashion. And perhaps you cross your fingers, if things play out the way they should with the chemistry and obviously with health being the number one factor for any team in any sport, if they can stay relatively healthy, we might not see this team fall back to 500, let alone below 500 at any point again this season if they can get that momentum rolling. And suddenly now, I'm a big believer. I don't know if you guys are, but I'm a big believer in Andrew will probably tell you I'm not like this in my personal life per se, but in sports, I think positive vibes and positive energy means a lot. Like I think there is an intangible to winning feels good, and you start feeling better, and the shoulders are you're sitting up a little straighter, and you're feeling a little more confident about your game. And you know what? I don't necessarily mind sharing the ball a little bit more now, because you know what? I don't mind if my scoring goes down a little bit, because you know what? We're winning. And I like this feeling, and I want to feel it more. And actually, we're starting to get more attention now that we're winning, not just in Toronto, but in the U.S. and the national media that we really care about as well. And we're kind of a big deal. We're feeling ourselves a little bit, and we see where we are in the standings, and we want to continue to hold on to this feeling. And I think the positivity starts kind of steamrolling that much more. And I think Toronto's at that key moment right now where they could really have a special part of their season, because these early games matter just as much. People talk about, talk to me in March, talk to me in April. No. Take care of business now. And those games in March and April, or those stretches where you might have a bit of an extended losing streak, or you might hit a couple of speed bumps, maybe they don't feel as bad because you built enough of a cushion with the success you had early on in the season. And I think Toronto has a lot of depth and versatility that they're going to be a problem for a lot of teams.
Yeah, winning can be contagious. And,
yes,
like you said, they got some 1-11 teams coming up, and those are certainly winnable, and a lot of other winnable games, but they've been playing really well against some tough teams too. So that's really good. Listen, once again, the book is called We the Raptors, 30 Players, 30 Stories, 30 Years. Very compelling read. Some great stories, some great memories. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking this time to join us. If you want to get a hold of Eric, you can follow Eric at Instagram at Eric__Smith and at Andrew Bricker. All right, guys, thank you so much for taking this time to join us.
Thanks very much, Joe.
Thanks for having us, Joe.
Actually, before we go, I want to get one quick thought. Toronto Tempo, how successful are they going to be?
I think it's going to be huge. I think it's going to be massive. I think it's going to be very much akin to what the Raptors were and what the Raptors ultimately became. I think there's a passion for the sport, period, let alone then a passion for women's sports. We've seen that certainly with hockey, and I think that the passion for women's basketball is going to be there. I think it's going to be a sellout every night when they hit the floor, and I believe that they just made a fantastic hiring with the head coaching position, and I think that the Blue Jays and the Argos and FC there's lots going on in the summertime, but this will kind of whet the appetite that much more and maybe keep folks satisfied in terms of their appetite for basketball. So I think it's going to be a massive success. And there's so many people in this area when we think about the GTA overall that it makes sense. It's a no-brainer to have the WNBA here and to be the first franchise outside of the U.S. I think it's an absolute home run, and it's long overdue.
For sure. They still have exhibition games. It'd be no problem, right?
Yeah.
I've also, this is very unscientific, but I've been in Toronto for the last month, and walking the streets of Toronto, I'm seeing a ton of Tempo gear already. I think fans are really, really hungry for it. And I think it's really significant that Tempo gear is not just being worn by young girls and by women. It's being worn by boys. It's being worn by men. I think this city is so excited to have a WNBA team. And whether they win or not right away, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for them, just like it was for the Raptors or even any expansion team. But they have a great coach. They have a really seasoned organization around them. I think they're going to be massively successful, and hopefully the wins are going to follow after that pretty soon.
All right. Year-round pro hoops. Yes, sir. Okay. Thanks, guys. Thanks again. When we come back, Leo Rautins talks about getting picked by the 76ers in the first round of the NBA draft. In 1992, the best locally owned restoration companies came together with one goal: to make disaster recovery better for Canadians. And to this day, DKI remains one of the only 100% Canadian-owned disaster restoration groups in the market. Fire, flood, or storm damage. When things go wrong, the right help makes all the difference. With the right tools and local expertise, we handle everything from emergency response to full-scale restoration, getting homes and businesses back on track the right way. Because a home is more than four walls, a business is more than a building, and recovery is about more than repairs. When you choose DKI, you're choosing a company that's put Canada first since 1992. Locally owned, nationally backed, Canadian through and through. Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center. Saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca. Hearing loss doesn't have to mean missing out. At Hear Canada, we help you take charge with a complimentary hearing assessment, because confidence starts with clarity. Discover hearing aids, accessories, and expert care at your local hearing center. Not sure where to start? Our Hearing Health Guide has the basics for you or a loved one. It worked for us. Book your free assessment today at hearcanada.com. Conditions may apply.
I was hoping I'd go to San Antonio at 19, to be honest. I loved the way they played, but I ended up going to the Sixers at 17. So it was pretty crazy 24 hours.
Wow. So what does it feel like to get drafted? I mean, first Canadian drafted in the first round of the NBA draft and join the Philadelphia 76ers. What was that moment like for you?
It was pretty cool. Obviously, this was my dream, right? This is what I wanted to do. And so when it comes to fruition, it's amazing. And what really shocked me, though, was the reaction back home. I literally did media calls and stuff from I think a draft was over about 1 p.m. on this day, and I was still doing calls 9 p.m. the next night, just one after the other. I was shocked. I didn't expect that, and so it was pretty cool. Like I said, that was my dream. The only thing is I was just leery, a little bit leery with the Sixers. As far as the value of a first-round pick, right? With a lot of teams, that's a big investment. With the Lakers and the Sixers, it wasn't looked at that way. So I was a little concerned about that. They also had, Dr. J and Bobby Jones at my position. So you got two NBA Hall of Famers at my spot. So there was some concern going in, but it was a great moment, obviously.
Discover the secret to timeless vitality at Renew Medical Center in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Our specialists unravel the science of aging, tailoring plans to defy its effects. Experience cutting-edge regenerative therapies such as stem cells and exosomes, addressing aging at its core.
It's a wonderful spot, and I highly recommend it for whatever you may need, whether you just want to feel better, you want to look better, have basically a quality of life, just to ramp it up a little bit as we age.
Liberate yourself from aging-related concerns, where accountability, technology, and passion for regenerative medicine converge. Begin your path to peak health and wellness with us. Schedule your appointment today at renewpv.com and elevate your quality of life.
Parents, what's the biggest fear for kids 10 to 14? A future they think they can't handle. At Believe, Become, Be You, we know confidence in the future is a habit we can build. Our course doesn't just prepare kids for the future, it seeds them with skills they will use now. For a limited time, the I Believe in Me Foundation is offering the first 1,000 kids and their parents 1 year free access. This priceless opportunity will save you over $2,000. This isn't just a course. It's a journey in developing life-enhancing skills that will grow with your child, fostering gritty minds, creative futures, and better bonds. Get signed up now at BelieveBecomeBeYou.com. That's BelieveBecomeBeYou.com.
And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great people. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, wherever you get your podcast from. Also, check out all the past shows on YouTube. All of our shows are on there. Clips, shorts, like and subscribe. It's absolutely free. Our socials, at Joe Swiss Tilley on Instagram and Threads. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show on Facebook. Thanks once again to Eric Smith and Andrew Bricker for joining us. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in the early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678. Joe Tilley here. My wife Penny Claire and I recently took an amazing trip to Egypt and Jordan with Trip Oppo. And here are our top 10 must-dos. Last but not least, we relaxed at a luxury resort and took a dip in the famous Dead Sea. This beautiful resort was a perfect way to cap off our incredible adventure in Egypt and Jordan. After days of exploring ancient ruins and bustling markets, it was wonderful to just kick back, put on a little mud, and soak up the sun by the Dead Sea. Oh, I almost forgot to mention the amazing cuisine in Egypt and Jordan. Don't forget to try the delicious local food like mouth-watering Egyptian barbecue. And the best part is that our Trip Oppo tour includes almost all of the meals, so you can indulge in the local cuisine without worrying about opening your wallet. I would highly recommend that you book your next trip through Trip Oppo. Call them today. Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit sleepyhollowcountryclub.com.